We all have to make sacrifices. Cassie will be our first victim. She'll be alone in a big, dark house in the middle of nowhere. How serious can we make this? That's the conversation two friends have before the crime they commit later. Today, you'll be introduced to the chilling story of Cassie Jo Stoddart, a high school senior in Pocatello, Idaho, whose murder was inspired by the movie Scream. As of 2020, the small town of Pocatello had a population of just over 56,000. It is known to be a quiet, mostly Mormon town in southwest Idaho. First, let's take a trip back to 2006. The Scream movie franchise was as popular at the time as it is today. Even though the first movie came out in 1996, before Cassie was murdered. The girl was an honors senior at Pocatello High School. She was in the same class with her boyfriend Matt Beckham and friends Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk. All four of them often spent their free time together. Cassie was a very pretty and young girl, with long, loose, dark hair. One could say that she was the epitome of beauty and intelligence. In a 2016 interview with Idaho magazine, Cassie's brother Andrew said that his sister was really artistic, had a passion for drawing, and loved music. She was a great role model and that she was a typical girl. Her classmates and friends Brian and Tori were obsessed with the movie Scream as well as other horror movies. They were fond of making their own videos, as Brian was often seen walking around the school with his Sony video camera. Among other things, Brian often filmed Cassie on the camera. Eventually, he and Tori started videotaping themselves, talking about the murders in general. We've already found a victim, and it might be our friend. We need a victim and we need to go for it. Cassie's gonna be the first one on that list. She'll be alone in a big, dark house. This is an excerpt from a video taken on September 21, 2006. The audio was recovered from a videotape that later fell into police hands, along with other evidence used in the murder case. Brian's attorney argued that the tape should not be considered because the friends were simply making a horror movie. On the evening of September 22nd, Cassie planned to stay home and watch over her in-laws' cats and two dogs. Her aunt and uncle were away on business for a few days and asked Cassie to stay at their house for those days. As many young people usually do in this situation, to avoid getting bored and feeling lonely, Cassie invited her boyfriend Matt to come over to watch movies and keep her company. Even though her mom wouldn't let her invite strangers into the house, Cassie did it her way. Brian and Tori came over later, and even though she hadn't invited them, they all chatted together and walked around the house. The dogs, uncles, to keep them from barking at the guys, Cassie had locked in one of the rooms. The guys fooled around, threw popcorn at each other, then said they were bored. It was at this hour that Tori seized the moment and opened the doors leading from the basement to the stairs and into the house. The guys then decided to all watch the movie Kill Bill 2 together. But after a while, Brian and Tori changed their minds and said they would go to the movie theater and watch something there. According to the court transcript from Idaho's 6th Judicial District Court, the guys actually left the house where Matt and Cassie were staying. They got into Tori's red car and drove down the street away from the residence, then pulled over and parked. There, Brian and Tori got out of the car and began to put on their costumes, which consisted of dark pants, shirts, gloves, and white painted masks. They also each armed themselves with an impressive knife. After getting into their car, the boys drove back and again drove through the residence and parked east of the house. They then drove down the driveway already on foot, wearing suits and carrying knives, and approached the house itself. Before they could enter the house from the basement, they had to break the window through which they had entered the basement. Once in the basement, Brian and Tori started making noise, stomping, banging on something, trying to get Cassie and Matt to come down the stairs and then scare their friends. The guys broke some things and threw something on the floor, smashing and creating a rumble. Then they found a control panel and turned off the lights in the whole house, then turned them back on after a while. But Cassie and Matt didn't go down into the basement. So Tori and Brian heard that Matt's mother had arrived at Cassie's house to take her son home. The time was 10:30 p.m. when he began to refuse, saying that there was something incomprehensible going on with the lights in the house. His mom suggested that Cassie go to their house for the night. Cassie declined, citing that the dogs needed to be walked early. Matt and his mom left and the girl was left alone. After Matt left, The guys turned off the power again and continued up the stairs. At the top landing, Brian opens and slams the closet door, wanting to make more noise and scare Cassie. The dogs outside the door in the room growled deafeningly as Brian and Tori entered the living room. The girl was lying on the couch and at the sight of them jumped up and asked who they were. Tori was ahead of Brian and was heading towards Cassie, who was yelling that she wasn't afraid of them and would kick their asses herself. Brian hears Cassie screaming and sees Tori swing his knife hand and stab the girl several times. She falls to the floor and a snorting, gurgling sound reaches Brian. Tori turns to her friend and says, "I know what I did, we have to kill her." Immediately he turns to Cassie again and stabs her a few more times. "I just killed Cassie, this is no joke. I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body settle and I killed her. It didn't seem real to me, but it all happened so fast. Screw it, we have to act fast." This dialogue took place between Tori and Brian after the girl was killed, already in Tori's car. The guys were cheering, yelling, "We did it, it was so easy." The guys drove in Tori's car to his house, where they didn't stay long. The first thing they did was to go into the garage, get some blue garbage bags, and after taking off the suits they were wearing, they packed their clothes and knives in them and changed into the clean clothes they had prepared beforehand. Grabbing a bottle of liquid, they put everything in the back seat of Tori's car and left the garage. On the way they bought matches and drove to the Black Rock Canyon area, where they went down the trail and tried to burn the bag of suits and knives. The liquid wasn't too flammable, so the stuff didn't want to burn. So then Tori and Brian just dug a hole and buried everything, throwing some branches on top. After all of this, the guys took another drive around the neighborhood and went to Tori's residence to watch movies. Cassie's relatives returned on September 24th, and a short time later Cassie's mother arrived at their house, who had not waited for her daughter by the appointed hour and had not received a call from her and decided to go to the relatives herself. Frank, Cassie's uncle, came out to meet his sister and would not allow her to enter the house, as there the dead body of the girl was found on the living room floor, with a lot of blood around her already dried up. The police were called and it was decided not to touch anything. The officers who arrived immediately took the body for examination, and themselves began an examination, during which it was found that the criminals had gotten into the house through the basement by breaking a window. The basement was found to be a real mess, and the electrical panel was open, which raised questions. There were also 2 Dobermans in the house, locked in a separate room, and if they had been around, they wouldn't have let anyone near the girl. Why had Cassie locked them up? A stranger wouldn't have been able to do that. The autopsy showed that Cassie died from multiple stab wounds as she was stabbed 26 times. At least 9 wounds were fatal. They affected the heart, lungs, liver, and the girl had no chance of survival. It was noted that the murder weapon was 2 different knives. There is a possibility that 2 people worked. There was no sexual assault. The death occurred during the night hours of September 22nd to 23rd. The girl's boyfriend Matt was questioned first. He said that he was at Cassie's house until 10 p.m. and Brian and Tori came over, but after an hour they got bored and left. Throughout the day on September 23rd, Matt tried to contact Cassie by phone, but got no answer. He could not go to the house and check what happened because he had no transportation, as his family had only 1 car and his mother used it to go to work. And on September 23rd, about 7 o'clock in the evening, his friend and classmate Tori Adamczyk came to pick him up, took Matt to his house, and they spent the whole evening and night together watching movies and loafing. At some point Matt got worried about Cassie and asked Tori to go get her, or at least to drive Matt there, to which he got the answer that Tori didn't have enough gas in the car, because the amount that she had was for a week, and Tori wasn't going to waste it. Matt didn't know about his friend's murder until Cassie's mother Anna called him on Sunday, September 24th, and asked what he had done to her daughter. Matt believed that Brian and Tori were treating Cassie well, perhaps even were in love, as they occasionally flirted with her. Police Lieutenant Gansky conducted a voluntary interview with Tori on September 24th, at his home in the presence of his parents. Tori stated that he did go with Brian to a party with Cassie and Matt, but since no one else showed up, he and a friend decided to leave the couple alone and go to a movie theater. However, when pressed, the guy couldn't give any details about the movie they allegedly watched in the theater, nor the content of the movie. He only said that immediately after the movie, he and Brian went back to his house and spent the rest of the night there. The next day, September 25th, Lieutenant Gansky conducted a voluntary interview with Brian, at which his mother, Pam Draper, was present. Brian's account of that evening was very similar to Tori's. They left Cassie's and went to the movie theater. And just like Tori, Brian couldn't remember what the movie they had seen 2 days earlier was about. Brian also said that he was very shocked when he found out Cassie had died and couldn't believe she was gone. A conversation with the theater controller revealed that neither Tori nor Brian had come to the movie, as the woman knew the young men well and would certainly remember them. That's when the police decided to pay closer attention to the friends. On September 25th, County Detective Tom Foltz had a conversation with a man who wished to remain anonymous. That conversation took place at Pocatello High School. And here's what the witness told us. Tori and Brian are obsessed with knives, guns, and horror movies. They like these movies so much that they write their own script for a movie that features a murder. This witness said she heard Cassie asking her friends to cast her in this movie. And about 2 months ago, Tori gave Cassie the script to read. Also, Tori said he loves movies like Scream, Friday the 13th. Tori has knife collections that he keeps in his bedroom closet. Tori also made a glove like the one in the movie Nightmare on Elm Street. The witness reported that he heard Tori bragging about how he could commit the perfect crime. That's because he watches a lot of murder movies and is constantly taking notes on how not to be discovered while committing a crime. At school, Tori likes to fool around and act out how he stabs people and slits their throats. That Friday, September 22, 2006, Tori invited this or that witness to Cassie's party, but was turned down. The cop also learned that Tori had been in love with Cassie for the past 2 to 3 years. 5 days after the crime, on September 27, 2006, Brian and Tori were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. They were charged as adults even though they were considered juveniles at the time. Suddenly, Tori cried and admitted that Brian had committed the crime. Brian in turn blamed Tori. He told the police that he was actually present during the crime, but did not participate. And in fact, he had formed the opinion that they had returned to the house just to scare Cassie and in no way to kill her. However, Brian soon gave in and revealed that he too had stabbed Cassie after Tori's orders and even took the investigators to the spot where he and Tori had burned the costumes and where they had buried the unburned parts. The cops dug up the soil and saw 2 masks, clothes, shoes, and knives. The killers even took off their socks and buried everything, because all the clothes and shoes were splattered with blood, which means they had planned in advance that they would change clothes. But the most interesting thing the police found at the bottom of the hole. It was a videotape that provided irrefutable evidence of this horrific crime. The length of the videotape was 40 minutes. Most of it was devoted to how Tori and Brian were painting store-bought masks. And then the guys recorded a video message to future serial killers, wished them success, and told about their plans to commit the first crime. The victims were to be Cassie and her boyfriend Matt. It was only by sheer luck that the mother saved her son by insisting he go home. Also on the tape was an interview that Tori conducted with Cassie and Matt on the afternoon of September 22nd, explaining afterwards in the footage that the two were about to be killed. Also included in the footage was Tori's red notebook, which police were still able to find in his home during the search. In addition to notes or what was needed for the murder, the notebook contained a list of 20 people that Brian and Tori were going to kill over the course of 2 years, 1 per month. When investigators began checking the people on the list, it turned out to include teachers, friends, girlfriends, and even one relative. In finding out the potential victims' relationships with Tori and Brian, police were stunned, as most had normal relationships and people went into shock when they learned they had been targeted for murder. About Tori and Brian, it should be noted that the boys did not at all seem to be suffering from harassment, bullying, or humiliation. They were normal, sociable, moderately spoiled, and intelligent guys. Most likely the problem is not in the environment, or rather not only in those who are around, but the problem is related to the problem boys themselves. During separate trials, Brian was found guilty on April 17, 2007, Tori was found guilty on June 8, 2007, and then on August 21, 2007 Brian and Tori, based on their conviction of first-degree murder, received a mandatory life sentence without parole and 30 years to life in prison each for the conspiracy to murder conviction. They both went to serve their sentences at the Idaho Correctional Institution. The sentence greatly upset Tori and Brian's families, who had been counting on the court's leniency because of the young age of the convicts. Tori's relatives were particularly outraged, and in 2010 Brian and Tori's attorneys filed separate appeals to the state Supreme Court, but both appeals were denied. Thereafter, disagreement with Tori's punishment prompted a variety of legal builds by the family over more than 10 years, and finally, in 2017, Tori Adamczyk lost the last court case whose ruling could have affected the length of his sentence. And now Tori and Brianna will not see freedom for the rest of their lives. Thanks for watching. I recommend checking out other true crime stories as well. Click right now and also don't forget the bell and subscribe to my channel.